everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. You are part of the official third annual now Less Lawn, More Life Kickoff. My name is Joanna Hall. I'm the CEO of Planet Wild. We are a small East Coast ecological landscape design firm specializing in rewilding and bringing back habitat for both residential clients as well as municipalities and corporations and so forth. And we realized there was only so much we can do as a local business to support this growing movement. And so 3 years ago, we launched this campaign as a way to support and accelerate this movement more broadly. Less Lawn, More Life actually started in the barn that I'm in right now with a bunch of colleagues from Planet Wild. It started as a local competition for different homeowners that were trying to rewild and wanted to learn from each other. It kind of picked up organically. Year 2, we had a lot of regional environmental groups and partners that joined, and it got a little bit bigger. And then this year, we have gone national. And so we are over the moon. We already have more participants than we had the first 2 years combined. And I think it just is a testament to the fact that people are starting to realize that we can do better with our individual pieces of earth. As you can see, we are joined today by the Doug Tallamy, which is just our sort of personal hero and inspiration. So I'm very excited to introduce Doug in just a few moments. But I did want to let you know that we are going to be at the end of the discussion sharing a little bit more about the challenge itself. So don't worry, we'll spend a few minutes at the end explaining how easy it is to participate, what to expect, what to do. We've really designed the program this year to make it as user-friendly as possible. But first of all, why are we all here? The concept of less lawn, more life is quite simple. We can do better. The traditional American lawn just doesn't make sense. It's no surprise that we are in a massive biodiversity, climate crisis. The way that we did things 80 years ago just needs to evolve. Not only is it better for the climate and for biodiversity and carbon capture and all the good things, it's just more beautiful. And it's better for us as humans. The reconnection with nature and the beauty is incredibly powerful. So we just think we can do better. And we do think it's hard and it does require a little bit of support and guidance. And that's what this challenge is designed to do, is to actually bring new folks into the movement. If you've been thinking about rewilding or planting natives or maybe doing things differently with your yard, but you kind of didn't know where to get started, that's what this program is designed to do. So ultimately, our goals are to inspire as many homes across America, as many pieces of land across America, to participate, to be inspired to do things differently, to engage with some of our challenges that we're going to share here, and ultimately to take action, to really activate. We are over the moon, as I mentioned, to share the incredible national partners that are supporting us this year, that are co-promoting. This is collective action at its best. Again, we are one organization, but together, right, we have some tremendous reach and expertise. Huge thank you in particular to the folks at Homegrown National Park. They are our core ally in this year, and we are thrilled for the partnership. And now, without further ado, I am so excited to introduce Doug Tallamy. I'm sure many of you know him. I can't believe I actually have to even introduce you, but Doug is the professor of entomology and wildlife ecology at the University of Delaware. Small fun fact, I'm from Delaware. Both of my parents were professors at the University of Delaware. I'm pretty sure, Doug, that they're streaming in from the south of France right now, where they have been actively rewilding. So if you need a beautiful Airbnb to stay in the Aveyron region, they are going to roll out the red carpet. Doug has sort of transformed the way we think about our yards and the way we think about the potential and the opportunity. And so I'm going to turn it over to Doug to really just help us think about the potential, the actual opportunity in our individual pieces of earth.
Well, thanks, Joanna. I didn't know that you were from Delaware. I didn't know that your parents taught there. Well, that's great.
Yes.
Okay, you've just given most of my talk, so let's jump right in. And I'm going to ask you what this is. To me, it looks like a fecal sac. You know what a fecal sac is. Birds don't want their babies to poop in the nest, so they've evolved this little sac. The babies put their poops in a sac, and the parents fly out and drop it, and it goes splat. And if you don't want to be eaten, it's good to look like a fecal sac. And that's what this bola spider is doing. But at night, it looks like a real spider, and it hangs from a leaf, directs a single strand of silk, puts one sticky glob of glue at the end there, and it goes hunting. You wouldn't think it would catch anything, but it does. Moths fly in, get caught, they spin them around, wrap them up in silk, and then they have a good meal. And after they've had one meal, they go hunting again, catch another moth, have another meal. And after they've had enough meals, they have the energy to create an egg mass. It's in a silken patch, and if hunting's really good, they make 2 or 3 egg masses. They hang there all winter long, and that's how they spend the winter. The real question is, why are moths flying into this one target? Well, it's not an accident. This is the female is actually releasing the sex pheromone of one particular species of moth. So all the moths that come in are males. They think she's a female. She is, but she's the wrong species. And I wanted to know what species of moth the bola spider in my yard was attracting. So I unwound the little bodies that were all underneath her, and it turned out to be the bronze cutworm. And I've got bronze cutworm males in my yard because I've got bronze cutworm caterpillars, and I've got bronze cutworm caterpillars because I've got goldenrod, which is their primary host plant. I also have this beautiful moth, the dot line white, because I've got oak trees, primarily white oaks, and because I don't rake the leaves away from underneath those trees. There is a dot line white cocoon in this leaf litter right there. You would never see it when you're raking leaves. And when we rake our leaves away, we're throwing a lot of interesting creatures away with them. I've got evening primrose moths because I planted evening primrose specifically to attract that beautiful moth. And it worked. The moth came, spends the day with its head stuffed in the flowers. Sometimes it's crowded, but it's always cute. I've got zebra swallowtails because I planted pawpaws. That is the only host plant of that beautiful swallowtail. It would take me a long time to describe all the species that now call our property home. It would not take me long to describe what's happening in a typical residential landscape like this. There is no goldenrod, so there's no bronze cutworm, so there's no bola spiders. There are no oak trees, so there's no dot line whites. There's no evening primrose, so there's no evening primrose moth, no pawpaws, no zebra swallowtails. There is very little that can live in a typical residential landscape, and we've got 135 million acres of typical residential landscapes in the U.S. That is 5 times larger than all of the land managed by the National Park Service. And we're not through. We're developing 800,000 new acres of natural areas every single year in the US. And that's one of the reasons we're seeing some scary headlines these days, like the insect apocalypse is here, talking about global insect decline. We've lost 3 billion breeding birds in the last 50 years. 22% decline in our butterflies just since the year 2000, and they weren't doing that well in the year 2000. 2/3 of Earth's wildlife is gone. 40% of Earth's plants face extinction. The UN predicts we're going to lose 1 million species to extinction in the next 20 years. And they made that prediction 3 years ago. So now it's the next 17 years. It's a prediction, hasn't happened yet. And we got to make very sure it doesn't happen because those are the species that run the ecosystems that we all depend on. But there's enough bad news that Elizabeth Kolbert gets to write the 6th extinction. It is talking about the 6th great extinction event the planet has ever been through. And this is the first one, though, that is caused by a living being. And you can guess who that is. Now, we do have parks and we do have preserves, particularly our national parks. They were established primarily because they were exquisitely beautiful places. And Teddy Roosevelt had a lot to do with that. He said the establishment of National Park Service is justified by considerations of good administration. So Teddy was patting himself on the back, as he should. Of the value of natural beauty as a national asset, and of the effectiveness of outdoor life and recreation in the production of good citizenship. In other words, our parks were created because they were pretty places for us to play in. They were not created with conservation in mind. And that's one of the reasons we only have 3.6% of the US in the national park system, and only 12% is federally protected, which lags behind a lot of other countries. But people ask, why our parks and preserves, why our land conservancies, why all these little places that we've concerned aren't good enough to sustain the biodiversity that we need? And it's a good question. And there are actually several answers, but the big one is they're typically too small. When you take a large area like this and you shrink it down to a little habitat fragment, and that's an exaggeration, you're taking large populations and shrinking them down to small or tiny populations. And that's the problem. Small populations are highly vulnerable to local extinction. Why? Because all populations fluctuate. In good times, they go up, and bad times, they go down. If you're a large population like this top line here, even in your down cycle, there's enough individuals so you can increase quickly when times get better. But if you're a tiny population, often in your down cycle, you hit zero. You blink out of your little habitat patch, and then you're gone. And unless you recolonize it, which is getting harder and harder, picture a box turtle crossing a major highway, it doesn't happen anymore, then you're permanently gone. That's called local extinction. And there's studies all over the planet, some of them more than 100 years in length, telling us the same thing. We have not preserved enough of the natural world to preserve the biodiversity that we humans require. Now, we tend to use extinction as a metric of trouble, and I don't think that's a good idea, because that's like going to the doctor when you're dead. We need to turn this around before things are extinct. So I think a better signal of a problem is defaunation. It's when the abundant species that are actually running our ecosystems start to decline. This is a great example. The American chestnut, it was the major tree from Maine all the way to Georgia along the Appalachian crest. We brought in the chestnut blight and essentially wiped it out. Now, it's not extinct. There's still sprouts that come up here and there, but it's functionally extinct. It's no longer performing the roles it once did in our eastern deciduous forest. Same with the rusty patch bumblebee. Not long ago, it was one of the most common bees in the entire continent. Today, if you see one, it's a big deal, and I have never seen one. So again, not extinct, but functionally extinct. Same with the American beaver. When Europeans came to this country, the hydrology of the entire country was established by beavers and maintained by beavers, and we trapped them all out. Not every last one, there's a few around, and every time a beaver acts like a beaver, we trap it and move it someplace else. So the hydrology is still changed. So we're talking about defaunation. That's the reduction in the abundance of the species that actually run our ecosystems. That's the real problem. It's local, it's everywhere. And believe it or not, we tend not to notice it. And we don't notice it because of something called shifting baseline. We tend to think that the way things were when we were kids is the way they've always been, the way they ought to be, and the way they will be in the future. So if we're born into a world that has been defaunated, we don't notice it. That's normal to us. None of us missed the passenger pigeon. It was the most numerous bird on the planet, but it was extinct before any of us were born. So shifting baseline means that we're losing the biodiversity that sustains us, and we don't even notice it. Edwin Wade Teal decades ago said we cannot make the world uninhabitable for other forms of life and have it habitable for ourselves. It is the most basic common sense. So what are we going to do? Well, we could listen to E.O. Wilson. He says we need to save nature. We need to save functioning ecosystems on at least half of planet Earth, or it will disappear everywhere. He said that in this book, Half Earth, Our Planet's Fight for Life. And he spent most of the book talking about the science that supports that bold statement. And then he ended the book. He didn't spend a lot of time telling us how we were going to save nature on half of planet Earth. Of course, so conservation biologists, that's a great idea. We'll just put half the Earth aside, and everything that's in trouble can be in that half. We'll be in the other half, and it'll be great. Problem is, half of terrestrial Earth is already in some form of agriculture. I don't see that disappearing anytime soon. And we got 8.2 billion people in the other half. And let me remind you that a billion is 1,000 million. There's a lot of us out there. And of course, we have all of our hardscape, our roads, our airports, our detritus, and we don't have a third half to put aside for nature. So how can we realize E.O. Wilson's dream? Well, I actually think we can, but we need a new approach to conservation to do it. We have to give up the idea that humans and nature cannot coexist. Not only is living with nature an option, it's now the only viable option that's left to us. Now, in the past, of course, conservationists worked pretty much exclusively where there weren't a lot of people. We now need to turn that on its head and practice conservation where there are a lot of people, because that's pretty much everywhere. So we're not just going to practice conservation here. We're going to practice it over here. But there's nothing to conserve over here. So we have to go beyond conservation into restoration. We have to put it back. And that means we've got to find ways for nature to thrive in human-dominated landscapes, not hang on by a thread, but thrive. Now, people talk about fragmentation of viable habitat as being the major problem, and it's certainly a big one. We've taken our viable habitats, reduced them to tiny little specks of what they used to be, and they're separated from each other, which means there's problems from inbreeding depression. So all the plants and animals in a habitat like this are closely related, and that causes problems over time. So the solution that's been proposed is to build biological corridors connecting these isolated habitat fragments so that plants and animals can move back and forth, and you don't have to mate with your brother or your sister. Okay, that's great. But look, the major problem still remains. They are still small populations because the habitat is still small. So I think we've got to go beyond biological corridors and build viable habitat in between viable habitats. We've got to put the plants back. And this is better. This is even better. The light areas will be where our major cities are in our agriculture. But we're going to put the plants back where we live, where we work, where we play. In other words, on our private properties. And that means we need a new attitude about property rights. We've got this idea that we can own a piece of the earth and do whatever we want with it. This is our castle and we're the kings, and don't tell us what to do. But our yards are not like Las Vegas. I know many of you know that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in our yards does not stay on our yard. That's the big difference. Our yards are all part of local ecosystems, and whatever we do on them, either positively or negatively, is going to impact that entire ecosystem. Let's talk about lawn. We've got a lot of it. 44 million acres of lawn is the latest statistic I've seen. That's an area bigger than New England dedicated to an ecological deadscape. Why do we do this? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a status symbol. It's a well-entrenched status symbol. We like neat. It's easy to keep lawns neat. And we have to display our Halloween decorations. But this is what happens when you decide to have a lot of lawn. You're determining whether rain is going to infiltrate or leave as stormwater runoff. And when it leaves as stormwater runoff, you're going to determine whether or not you're polluting your local watershed. You're going to, all the nitrogen and phosphorus and herbicides and insecticides that you add to your lawn is going to wash off into the watershed, polluting it. You're going to determine how much carbon you're adding to the atmosphere every single time you mow. Remember, mowing adds carbon, and we do that just about once a week. You're also going to determine how well you're supporting pollinators. If you have a lawn the way we're supposed to have a lawn, you're not supporting pollinators at all. You have totally removed pollinator habitat. You're also going to determine how much carbon you're sequestering, how much carbon you're pulling out of the atmosphere, locking up in plant tissues. Trees are good, but so are meadow plants. And then those plants actually pump carbon into the ground through their root systems. So in other words, you're determining how well you are helping climate change. And then your plant choice is going to determine whether you're harboring ecological tumors in the form of invasive plants. These plants from other continents, very poor at supporting food webs. They don't stay where we plant them. That's calorie pair you're looking at. And this is what calorie pair does. And we've got dozens of these ornamentals that have invaded our ecosystems, pushing out the native plants that do support them and replacing it with plants that don't. So our plant choices, the final thing our plant choices are going to do is determine whether or not you're supporting a viable food web. Are you choosing the plants that actually share some of the energy they capture from the sun with other creatures, typically as mediated by insects? So how we landscape, how much lawn we have, and our plant choices are going to determine how much life our properties can sustain. And that is an awesome responsibility. And unfortunately, it's an awesome responsibility that most people don't know they have. That's why we're doing this. We're trying to get that word out. It also creates a grassroots solution to the biodiversity property. Remember all those people out there. We have millions and millions and millions of them. Many of them are property owners. And if they realize they have a responsibility towards conservation, we can turn this around. I do talk about property owners because 78% of the lower 48 states is privately owned. 85.6% of the area east of the Mississippi is privately owned. If we don't practice conservation on private property, we're going to fail. And that makes property owners collectively the hope and the future of conservation. So there's something that's common to conservation approaches. It really becomes a people issue. Whether or not they succeed is going to depend on the decisions that you and I make. We need to change our adversarial relationship with nature to a collaborative one. I think it's the only way forward. And the question is, can we do that? Well, of course we can do that. It doesn't mean you have to save biodiversity for a living, but you can save it where you live. And if you do, it empowers you. There are more and more people that are worried about the state of the planet, but they feel powerless. What can one person do? Well, one person can shrink the lawn. One person can change their light bulbs, outdoor lights from white to yellow lights that don't attract nocturnal insects. One person can add a pollinator garden. One person can remove their invasive plants. One person can be sure to have keystone plants on their property, the ones that are actually supporting the food web the best. One person can fire your mosquito fogger. One person can hire Planet Wild. One person can do a whole bunch to improve the ecological function on their property and then enhance their local ecosystem instead of continuing to degrade it. And very importantly, it shrinks the problem down to something that's manageable for each one of us. Don't think about the entire planet's problems. You get depressed. Worry about the piece of the earth that you can influence. If you own property, it's obvious. That's where you start. If you don't own property, help somebody who does. Robert Swan once said the greatest threat to our planet is believing that someone else will save it. It's not going to be someone else. It's going to be you. It's going to be you. I'll help a little bit, but it's going to be you. And whether or not you do so now is going to determine nature's fate and then ultimately our own. Thank you very much.
Incredible. Doug, we just gave you a live round of applause here in our little mini
All right, thank you, thank you.
we're reinvigorated all over again. Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible. I know we have a lot of questions. So maybe let's pull up Krista as well. If we can. From Homegrown. Hi, Krista. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Krista, and I am the Strategic Partnership and Science Lead at Homegrown National Park. Been with the organization for about 3 years now, and I have my hands in a little bit of everything. I'm happy to answer questions.
Amazing. And then we've also got Murray Fisher here, who is one of our lead ambassadors for the Less Lawn, More Life campaign and has been helping us run this. You're going to all be seeing him on a lot of videos coming up here during the course of the challenge. So we can just move right into some Q&A before we get into more details about the challenge and how you can all now do your small part on your land. So let's pop open the Q&A here. I'm going to start backwards. So if lawns appear very dead, what's next? Dig up roots, compost, and is solarizing necessary?
If they appear very dead, they've got to be dead because they're really competitive, particularly if you don't want to ever overseed a lawn because those seeds won't compete. If it's really dead, you can just plant right through it. But as long as those roots are dead. If they're not dead, solarizing is one way to do that. You can do the lasagna method where you put cardboard all over the place. You've got to kill the plant roots, and once that's done, then you can start planting.
Awesome. We got another question here from Susan Akers. What is the best opening statement to approach residents in a neighborhood where landscapers are employed on a weekly basis to support the deadscapes? We get this a lot as well. Just curious, Doug, from your perspective, if you've heard of any strategies or tactics to convince neighbors.
Yeah, the trouble is it's not a one-sentence soundbite.
Right.
You know, it's a little bit more complicated than that. One approach I've heard that apparently works is to find out what it is they're afraid of. It could be they're just afraid of going outside the typical landscaping norm, and their neighbor's going to hate them. It could be they think that their kids are going to get a mosquito-borne disease and that native plants support mosquitoes. They've got all kinds of crazy ideas out there. When you find out what they're afraid of, then you can give them the real facts and say, well, maybe there's nothing to be afraid of, and give them alternatives to what they're doing. The best way to convince your neighbor is to have a model ecosystem yourself on your property that is functional, but also really attractive and fits into the cultural norm. That's our landscaping challenge, but we can do it. We have done it, and that will be more convincing than anything else.
Yep, that makes sense. Spot on. Okay. We got a question about if you recommend no-mow lawn varieties.
No. We're going to reduce the area of lawn, but it's still the place where we're going to walk and we're going to mow it. It's a cue for care. It shows that we fit in with the culture, but we're going to have less lawn. What I support is having no mow areas where you never mow and you never walk. And the best way to, if you don't want to have trees and beds under them, then a pollinator garden, some kind of a meadow situation. A little bit harder to do. But having tall grass that you still walk on and mow occasionally, that's not going to support the biodiversity we need. It's better than 3 acres of manicured lawn, but we can do better than that, I think.
Yep, amazing. A question here from Lindsay McCann. Do balcony gardens in a smaller city actually make a collective difference, even if it's just a pod or a few?
I'm going to turn this over to Krista.
I had a feeling that you would. So yeah, they actually do make a big difference. They're kind of like pit stops for biodiversity. You're going to still get a ton of really cool native insects and pollinators stopping off. So I really recommend, if you have a small space and you can only put a couple of plants out, looking up keystone plants, which are the genera that support the most diversity. Goldenrods, asters, they do pretty well in pots. And those, you will get just tons and tons of pollinators on them, even if it's up on a balcony.
And I might add that the list of the best native plants in containers in your ecoregion can be found on our website, homegrownnationalpark.org. So you don't have to guess, just look it up.
Yep.
Fantastic. And we'll be pushing that out with one of the challenges as well, linking to those resources. Another question from Pat. I'm on 2 acres surrounded by corn and soybean fields. Will I be attracting pollinators to their doom by planting natives?
Well, not necessarily. It would be wonderful if you get the farmer who's growing those corn and soybeans to not use neonicotinoid seed coatings. You can show him some facts that say, hey, he's not going to increase his yield by doing that, but he is biologically polluting, not biologically, he's poisoning the land around him. Only 5% of that seed coating is taken up by the plant itself, and the other 95% washes off into the watershed or blows away on dust. And if you can get him to stop doing that, you're probably in pretty good shape. Because your 2 acres it's a good chunk of land. You can support a lot of things there. You just don't want poison coming over from the farm.
Okay, excellent. I'm just running through these because we have so many that I want to get as many in as we possibly can. These are fantastic. Can you recommend, this is from Drew, can you recommend a good native ground cover that can be walked on similar to grass?
No.
Okay.
That's the beauty of grass. It is a plant that can take foot traffic and still bounce back. You could have wild ginger, you could have foam flowers, you could have ferns, you could have May apples. These are all wonderful ground covers, but when you walk on them, you squish them. So now buffalo grass, if you're in the Midwest, is a native grass that can take some foot traffic. But again, if you treat it like a lawn, it's not going to preserve much biodiversity. So I would just say, here's the lawn. That's not going to be my refuge, and create refuges with the real plants that will support them in the areas where you reduce your lawn.
Okay, excellent. We actually just got this question ourselves on social media. What about dandelions? Shall I leave the dandelions in my lawn? I'm reducing lawn as fast as I can, but I lost the question. But yeah, what should I do about dandelions?
Yeah, there are, quote, weeds that come up in our lawn. Of course, if you use turf grass fertilizer, there's an herbicide in there that's going to get rid of all those broadleaf weeds, which means you'll have just grass and nothing for the pollinators. So dead nettle and dandelions and white clover, they do supply pollen and nectar for some generalist pollinators. It is better than nothing. If that's an issue, a social issue in your yard, I'll just say the same thing. Manicure the lawn that you have. You can just dig them out. You don't need herbicides to get rid of those things. And then focus on the other areas where there's not lawn. But if nobody's yelling at you, sure, keep the dandelions.
Okay, great. And they make good tea.
Well,
I've
good.
also,
Yeah.
speaking of turning them into edibles, garlic mustard. I've heard not to pull up garlic mustard, true or false? And why is it so hard to find native plants? I wanted to use natives in my hanging baskets this year. Where are they? Okay, those are two very distinct questions. There's obviously the supply chain issue on native plants, but maybe first we just start with garlic mustard. I know last year we had our kids pull it up and we made some pesto, which was delicious, but there are a lot of conflicting stories about when to pull it up, when to leave it, and so forth.
Bern Blassie at Cornell has done a very interesting long-term study, exclosure experiments, where he has several different treatments for garlic mustard. Treatment one is to do nothing. Just let it do its thing. And then all different ways of controlling it, cutting it, pulling it up, spraying it. And after, I think it's more than 20 years now, the treatment where he did nothing has the least garlic mustard. So what he thinks is that you're resetting the clock. Every time you pull it up, you're disturbing the soil, activating the seed bank again. I don't think he's explained it perfectly about why that happens, but he's got good data. That's what happens. Pulling garlic mustard is pretty low on my list. My wife does it all the time, but they're the other invasives, porcelain berry, all those guys that are taking over the world. That's where you should focus your efforts.
Okay, well, you've just changed my weekend plans. Okay, any suggestions for reducing lawn on a budget? I'm gonna let Murray take this one.
Yes.
Well, I've done this experiment a lot on our property in several areas. I just stopped mowing entirely, and that's obviously a lot cheaper and easier to maintain it. And I've watched to see what invasives come in. And in one area, a lot of invasives are coming in, so it actually either takes my time or hiring somebody to weed those a little bit. I do it myself, but it could take paying somebody. But then one of the other areas is just stayed tall grass almost for the last 4 years. It just must have been thick enough. Very, very, very few things have been seeded there. And so I think it's worth anyone who can experimenting with just stopping mowing some little section of your yard. It's cheaper, it's easier, and then just monitor it. And if it gets out of control, you can plant a bunch of natives, or you could start managing it in a different way. But doing less is a good option.
I also really quickly, go ahead, Doug.
No, you go, Chris.
I also wanted to recommend this really cool company called Chip Drop. You basically just go to their website, add your name to a list, and you get arborist chips. So a local tree company is just going to come by and dump an entire truckload of chips at your property for free. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, so it is a medium-sized metro. I usually get my chips dropped within 48 hours. If you're in a more rural area, it may take a bit longer. That's a great way to get free chips to do the lasagna method. So you're saving cardboard, you're putting that down, you put chips on top, and that's a great way to smother new sections of grass and expand your beds too.
And I'll just add that Larry Weiner suggests that you can actually push your lawn towards warm season native bunch grasses by mowing it heavily in the spring, then not mowing the rest of the summer, And doing that a couple times or for a couple years in a row. And that discourages the cool season European grasses that we make our lawns out of and encourages bunch grasses, andropogon and a bunch of other things that will come in. So without actually planning anything, just changing your mowing schedule, he says you can push it towards a more native meadow.
Okay, fantastic. We'll do a couple more questions and then we'll get to just talking about next steps on the challenge. So obviously we get this question a lot. I've heard your answer. It's very eloquent, but a big concern that folks have is about ticks and mosquitoes. Should we be using the organic pesticides and so forth? Should we not? Is this going to make this an issue? How do I convince my neighbors it won't?
Well, let me talk about mosquitoes first. The mosquito companies say that they're using an organic, natural product that only kills mosquitoes. And if that were true, I'd hire them too. But it's not true. Organic, natural, it's pyrethroids made by chrysanthemums. So, maybe it's organic and natural, but so is cyanide, so is ricin. So being organic and natural, they're twisting your arm there a little bit. Only kills mosquitoes. That's not even close to true. That is blatant false advertising. It kills all the insects it comes in contact with, including our monarchs, including the pollinators, including all the things we're trying to bring to our yard. It also doesn't control mosquitoes. You don't control mosquitoes in the adult stage. You control them in the larval stage. Use mosquito dunks with a bucket in your yard. It works really well. Ticks, we have too many ticks because we have too many deer. That is the ultimate cause. And until we get serious about that, ticks are going to be an issue. Now, I've had Lyme disease 5 times, so I get it. It's real. But designing a landscape that doesn't support any rodents or any ticks is a dead landscape. So we've got to find a compromise. It's another use of the swaths of grass in your yard, particularly during May and June, during high periods of infectivity. Stick to those areas. Ticks crawl up on vegetation, put out their little legs, and grab onto you. It's called questing when you walk by. So you stick to the mowed areas during those periods of time. Another way, the Carey Institute has shown that if you increase the biodiversity in your yard, particularly mammal diversity, so add the chipmunks and the squirrels and the foxes and the coons and the possums and the skunks. Many of them are dead-end hosts. So the Lyme disease, the Borrelia, gets siphoned off into those dead-end hosts, and infectivity levels per tick goes down. So all those things are options, but the ultimate control of ticks, of deer tick, the black-legged tick, that's what we're talking about, is to get the deer populations back down where they belong.
Okay, excellent. We have our colleague, the deer hunter over here who's nodding vigorously. Burning bush. There is just so much all over. It's horrible. What to do with this plant? So Lori is asking, if I get it chipped, will it harm things? Will it harm the mulch that it becomes?
I don't think anybody's actually studied that. I wouldn't worry too much about that. The object is to get it to stop making those zillions and zillions of seeds. My neighbor had a whole row of burning bush. They're now gone, but we're still fighting the seedlings that are coming up every single year. They really do make a lot of seeds. But I don't think chipping's gonna hurt. Maybe somebody else knows more about that, but I don't think it's a problem.
Okay. All right. I think we have so many incredible questions, some of which we can answer. We're going to be, as part of the challenge, we'll be, I think, circulating some of these, questions, answers. Hopefully this conversation can keep going, and a lot of it can also come, and we're already noticing it in the chat, from peers, from other, members of the campaign who have experienced this and have been going through it. So it's all about just community and supporting each other on this journey. It is not easy. It takes a village. I am going to thank you, Doug. Thank you so much.
I'm going to say goodbye because I got another thing coming up, but good luck to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and just now walk everyone through the challenge and how it's going to work now that we are officially kicked off. All right. Okay, so We have designed this to be as simple as possible. This is now our 3rd year, so we just continue to learn, we continue to refine. As we go through this, if folks have suggestions or ideas, we're all ears. First of all, it is going to run for 12 weeks. So it starts today and it runs through July 1st. The primary mechanism for participating in this challenge is just to look out for your 1 email a week where you're going to get a new, we're calling it a sort of micro challenge, each week with a 2 to 3 minute video guiding you through week by week by week all of the sort of best practices to help improve the ecological health of your land, of your piece of earth. Each one of these weekly challenges are led by an incredible team of experts, mostly from the partners that are participating here on the campaign with us. We've designed these to be really accessible, so there's always an entry point. If you can only watch the video, by the way, that's already fantastic. Watch and share the video. We're learning, we're educating, we're getting inspired, share it with others. That's already a win. Otherwise, there is going to be an accessible entry point, 1 hour a week, take the challenge. We're also going to provide some stretch targets, additional ways to get involved and do more each week. But that is the goal. 1 challenge a week. It'll be dropped in your email box if you've joined the challenge. We're also going to be dropping them on socials, so there'll be lots of ways to access those. Something that we are introducing this year is the Wildr score. And so this is a way to actually measure your progress over the course of 12 weeks. So the first challenge is actually to take your Wildr score. Oh, sorry, I was going to show you. I'll come back to that. Is to take your Wildr score. It is a very simple 5-minute assessment. You can do it on mobile, you can do it on desktop, with whatever's easier. We do encourage you to go outside and sort of, look at the land, and, it's going to ask you questions about your trees and what kind of plants you might have growing and so forth. Don't overthink it and don't get discouraged. You might be starting with, a blank slate of lawn, and that's okay, because that means you have a ton of upside. We'll also be inviting you to join the iNaturalist page. Some of the questions for folks that are new to this, it might be a bit intimidating. Which kind of native plants do you have? What sort of species? But we're going to make it easier over time, because if you join the Less Lawn, More Life page on the new amazing iNaturalist app, then you don't need to know what the species are. It's going to tell you, and it's actually going to pull in those observations into the score. So our goal is that you're going to start by taking your self-assessment. You're going to get these weekly challenges, and at the end, you're going to be able to take your score again and see if we've made some improvements. So that's challenge number 1. Again, you'll all be receiving it. You'll all be receiving it in your inbox if you've joined the challenge. Just wanted to highlight, these weekly challenges are being led by some incredible industry experts. I mean, we are just over the moon. Many of them are led by individual partners that have joined up. And so I'm not even going to tell you what the challenges are, because we don't want you to worry or overthink it. It's just 1 a week. All you got to worry about is that 1 activation, but they're going to be fun. So we look forward to the ride. A little bit more about the Wildr score. It is going to be a very simple 1 to 100. It is a blend of data streams that includes wildlife, your land management practices, habitat diversity, ecosystem services. And so we're going to be refining this score and this methodology over time. So at the very end of the survey, at the score, there's an opportunity to give feedback. We would love any ideas, thoughts, suggestions. The goal is really to meet people where they are and give them instant actionable guidance on sort of what to do next. So with that, I think we are going to conclude the kickoff portion, and we've gotten a lot of questions about the recording. We will be sharing this with everyone that has joined afterwards, so you won't be missing anything. And you will get all the instructions, including the link to the quiz, by email. So no worries, everything is going to be coming into your inbox. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This has been an incredible kickoff, very, very well attended. So here's to a successful challenge. See you all soon. Thank you.